At 8:58 a.m., a cleaning lady walked into a boardroom full of executives and said 7 words in Korean that made a billionaire's face go white. 2 minutes later, a vice president was being dragged out by security, screaming that nobody should believe a janitor over a Stanford MBA. And by noon, she went from making $14 an hour to holding a check for $85,000. But here's the thing. She'd been hiding in that building for 6 years, pushing a mop past corner offices, emptying trash cans filled with million-dollar contracts, listening to conversations that could move stock prices, and never saying a word. She wasn't hiding because she was ashamed. She was hiding because one wrong word could get her mother deported. Her name was Maya Santos, and 72 hours ago, she was invisible. This is the story of how she became invaluable. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel like you didn't matter, drop your name and where you're watching from in the comments below. Because what happens next might just change how you see yourself. Let's go back to Friday, to the moment a billionaire made an offer that would either save her family or destroy everything she'd built. It started on a Friday afternoon in the executive boardroom of Technova Industries, a sleek fortress of glass and steel that towered over the city skyline like a monument to corporate ambition. The boardroom itself was a shrine to excess, with a table carved from a single piece of imported mahogany, chairs upholstered in Italian leather, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view most people would never see in their entire lives. Brandon Cross, the company's founder and CEO, stood at the head of that table. He was the kind of man who had been wealthy for so long that he'd forgotten what struggle felt like. His suit cost more than most families earned in a month. His watch cost more than most people's cars. And his daily salary, the amount he earned just by existing as the head of this corporate empire, was $30,000. Every single day, $30,000. Just for being Brandon Cross. On this particular Friday, Cross was waving a document in the air with the casual arrogance of a man who had never been told no. It was a thick stack of papers, maybe 35 pages, covered entirely in Korean characters that none of his highly paid executives could read. This arrived this morning, Cross announced to the room, his voice carrying the bored authority of someone who expected solutions to materialize simply because he demanded them. From Chunghwa Technologies in Seoul, they want a partnership worth $500 million. $500 million. And they need this translated in 72 hours, or the deal goes to our competitors. The executives shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. These were men and women with degrees from Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. They had MBAs and PhDs and certifications that covered entire walls of their corner offices. But not a single one of them could read Korean beyond ordering from a menu. And even then, most of them just pointed at pictures. Their head translator was in Seoul, dealing with a family emergency. Their assistant translators were in Tokyo, working on a different project. And their deadline was ticking away with every passing second. Cross smiled, but there was no warmth in it. There was never warmth in his smiles. They were calculations, power plays, chess moves designed to make people uncomfortable. Tell you what, he said, scanning the room with eyes that missed nothing and valued even less. Anyone who can translate this document accurately in 72 hours gets my daily salary as a bonus. Someone in the back of the room laughed nervously. It was the kind of laugh that escapes before the brain can catch up and realize that silence would have been smarter. Your daily salary? The man asked, already regretting the attention. $30,000, Cross confirmed, savoring the number like fine wine. 1 day's work for 3 days of yours. Seems fair, doesn't it? The executives chuckled at the absurdity of the challenge. It was the kind of laughter that fills space without meaning anything, the corporate equivalent of white noise. Most of them couldn't order bibimbap without butchering the pronunciation, let alone translate complex semiconductor terminology and partnership agreements. But Cross wasn't really expecting any of them to succeed. He was making a point. He was reminding them that they were replaceable, that their expensive educations and impressive titles meant nothing if they couldn't solve the problems he needed solved. In the corner of that boardroom, invisible to every single person present, Maya Santos pushed her cleaning cart past the open doorway. She was 24 years old, small in stature, but carrying herself with the compressed energy of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. Her uniform was the standard issue gray of the custodial staff, designed specifically to be forgettable. She'd been working as a custodian at Technova for 6 years, ever since she was 18 years old and desperate enough to take any job that would have her. 6 years of pushing that cart through these hallways. 6 years of emptying trash cans and scrubbing toilets and cleaning up after people who never once acknowledged her existence. 6 years of keeping her eyes down, her expression blank, her presence as forgettable as the color of the walls. That was how she survived. That was how she kept her family safe. As she passed the boardroom, Maya heard every word of Cross's challenge. She understood the Korean document he was waving around. She could have translated it in her sleep. But she kept walking, kept pushing her cart, kept being invisible. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't need to look at it. She'd been expecting this message for weeks, dreading it with every fiber of her being. But she looked anyway. Eviction notice, 72 hours to vacate. $28,000 in back rent, due in exactly 3 days, or she and her mother would be thrown out onto the street. 3 days. The same deadline as Cross's challenge. The same 72 hours that could mean everything or nothing. And here was Brandon Cross, casually offering $30,000, $2,000 more than she needed, to anyone who could do something Maya had been doing secretly for years. Translate Korean. Maya Santos wasn't just a janitor. She had never been just a janitor. She was fluent in 3 languages: Korean from her mother, who had sung her lullabies in that language before she could walk; Spanish from her father, who had told her bedtime stories about his childhood in Mexico City; and English from growing up in America, from watching cartoons and reading library books and dreaming of a future that kept slipping further away. She worked 3 jobs to keep her family alive. From 4 in the afternoon until midnight, she cleaned offices at Technova, pushing her cart through endless hallways of indifference. From midnight until 8 in the morning, she worked as a caregiver at a nursing home across town, helping elderly patients through the long dark hours when everyone else was sleeping. And from 9 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, while most people thought she was resting, she sat at her secondhand laptop and worked as an anonymous online translator. Her rating on the translation platform was 4.97 out of 5 stars. She had completed over 450 projects: corporate documents, legal contracts, technical manuals, medical reports. Companies around the world had paid for her services without ever knowing that the expert translator handling their sensitive documents was a 24-year-old custodian who cleaned toilets for a living. She was one of the highest-rated Korean translators on the entire platform, and nobody at Technova had any idea. Maya's mother, Jiwon, had suffered a stroke 3 years ago. The damage had left her partially paralyzed, unable to work, dependent on medications that cost more than Maya could afford and care that never seemed to be enough. During her recovery, while Maya was drowning in hospital bills and working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, Jiwon's visa had expired. They'd meant to renew it. They'd filled out the paperwork, gathered the documents, prepared everything they needed. But then another bill arrived, and another emergency drained their savings, and suddenly renewing a visa seemed less important than keeping food on the table. Now Jiwon was undocumented. One wrong move, one moment of visibility, one phone call to immigration and customs enforcement, and Maya's mother would be deported to a country she hadn't lived in for 30 years. Back to Korea, alone, disabled, with no one to care for her. That was why Maya stayed invisible. That was why she never spoke up, never drew attention, never let anyone see who she really was. Her father, Carlos Santos, had been an engineer at Technova 6 years earlier. He'd been brilliant, creative, passionate about his work. He'd helped develop the GX 600 semiconductor series, the technology that was now making the company billions of dollars in revenue every single quarter. But when the economy shifted and Technova decided to restructure, they'd thrown Carlos away like garbage. No severance, no reference, no acknowledgement of the years he'd given them. Just a cardboard box and a security escort to the parking lot. The stress destroyed him. He couldn't find another job at his level, couldn't accept that everything he'd built had been erased so easily. His health deteriorated. His spirit broke. He died 18 months after Technova fired him, leaving behind $48,000 in medical debt and a daughter who would never, ever forget what this company had taken from her family. Maya still carried his moonstone seal in her pocket. It was a traditional Korean stamp, carved from pale blue stone with characters that meant knowledge illuminates. Her father had used it to sign his engineering documents, pressing it into red ink and leaving his mark on the work he was so proud of. Now Maya used it as a reminder of everything she'd lost, of everything she was fighting for, of the father who had believed in her potential even when the whole world tried to convince her she was worthless. So as she pushed her cart past that boardroom, Listening to executives laugh about a challenge they couldn't possibly complete, Maya faced an impossible choice. If she revealed her abilities, she could win that $30,000. She could save her family from eviction. She could finally stop drowning in debt and desperation. She could prove that she was more than a cleaning lady, more than a forgettable face in a gray uniform, more than the invisible woman who emptied their trash. But if she revealed herself, she'd also reveal her mother. She'd expose their secret. Immigration would come asking questions. 6 years of staying invisible, staying safe, staying alive would be destroyed in a single moment of ambition. She watched through the doorway as the executives fumbled with basic Korean phrases, mispronouncing words that Maya's mother had taught her before she could walk. She watched Jason Mitchell, the vice president with the Stanford MBA and the smile that never reached his eyes, pretend to examine the document with false confidence. Her fingers found the moonstone seal in her pocket. She gripped it until her knuckles turned white, until the carved characters pressed into her palm like a brand. Then Maya Santos made her decision. She slipped away from that boardroom, but she didn't go home. What she was about to do would either save her family or make everything 1,000 times worse. Because she wasn't the only person in that building with secrets to hide. Kindly drop a comment below and tell me what you would do. Would you take the risk? Let me know below. Maya found a brilliant solution that night, but someone was about to steal it from her. The document from Chunghwa Technologies arrived by courier that Friday afternoon, delivered with the kind of urgent formality reserved for communications worth hundreds of millions of dollars. 35 pages of dense semiconductor specifications, partnership terms, legal clauses, and technical language that would determine whether Teknova secured the most important deal in their company's history. The countdown began. 68 hours remaining. Maya knew she couldn't access the document during normal work hours. Too many people wandering the halls, too many cameras watching every corner, too many chances that someone would see the cleaning lady doing something that cleaning ladies weren't supposed to do. But she had something the executives didn't have, something none of them had ever considered. She had after-hours access to every single room in the building. Her keycard opened doors that were locked to everyone else. Her cleaning schedule gave her legitimate reasons to be in spaces that would have seemed suspicious for anyone else. Her invisibility, the same invisibility that had trapped her for 6 years, was suddenly her greatest advantage. Saturday night, long after the last executive had gone home to their weekend plans, Maya used her cleaning credentials to enter the translation department. The office was dark and silent, filled with the hum of sleeping computers and the distant sound of the building's ventilation system. The Chunghwa document sat on the lead translator's desk, abandoned and untouched. 35 pages of opportunity, just waiting for someone with the skills to unlock it. Maya sat down at the desk, pulled out her own laptop from her bag, and began to work. She worked for 6 hours straight, her fingers flying across the keyboard with the precision of someone who had been doing this for years. The technical terminology was complex, filled with semiconductor jargon and manufacturing specifications that would have stumped most translators. But Maya had spent years studying exactly these kinds of documents. Her father had explained the technology to her when she was a teenager, drawing diagrams on napkins and describing how electrons moved through silicon in ways that made the invisible visible. She completed 3 critical sections, catching errors and ambiguities that would have cost the company millions if they'd been overlooked. She clarified confusing clauses, flagged potential legal concerns, and translated with the precision that had earned her a 4.97 rating on the freelance platform. When she finished, she didn't sign her real name. She couldn't risk that. Instead, she left a note on the whiteboard next to the desk. Night Phoenix. A small symbol. A hidden signature. Something to prove she'd been there without revealing who she was. The Phoenix was a creature that rose from ashes, that transformed destruction into rebirth. It felt appropriate for what Maya was trying to do. But as she translated deeper into the document, page after page of corporate language and technical specifications, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. Buried in the partnership terms, hidden behind layers of business jargon and legal euphemisms, was a clause requiring Teknova to restructure their workforce upon implementation of the partnership. The language was deliberately vague, designed to obscure the real meaning from anyone who wasn't paying close attention. But Maya understood exactly what it meant. 350 layoffs. 350 people would lose their jobs if this deal went through. 350 families would be destroyed the same way her family had been destroyed when Teknova threw her father away. And among the workers who would lose their jobs were members of her mother's extended family. cousins who had helped them survive when her father died, aunts and uncles who had sent money when Maya couldn't make rent, people who had no idea that their own company was planning to discard them like outdated equipment. Maya stared at the screen, her hands trembling over the keyboard. The glow of the monitor cast harsh shadows across her face in the empty office. If she completed this translation perfectly, if she helped Technova secure this deal, she'd be enabling the same kind of destruction that had killed her father. She'd be helping them throw away 350 more people just like him. But if she stayed silent, if she walked away from this opportunity, her own family would be homeless in 3 days. Her mother would lose access to the medical care keeping her alive. Everything Maya had sacrificed for the past 6 years would be for nothing. She sat in that dark office for a long time, staring at the screen, feeling the weight of an impossible choice pressing down on her shoulders. Then she made her decision. She continued translating. But she didn't just translate. She left notes in the margins. She clarified the ambiguous language around workforce restructuring, making it impossible for anyone to pretend they didn't understand what they were agreeing to. She flagged the sections that needed ethical review, that required human resources involvement, that couldn't be signed off without proper consideration of the human cost. Maybe, she thought, she could save both families. Maybe the truth would matter to someone. Maybe forcing them to see what they were doing would make them choose differently. It was naive. She knew it was naive, but it was the only way she could live with herself. She finished at 3 in the morning, exhausted beyond description, and slipped out of the building like a ghost. No one saw her come. No one saw her go. She was invisible, just like always. Sunday morning, Jason Mitchell arrived at Technova before anyone else. Mitchell was the kind of man who had learned early in life that success wasn't about what you knew or what you could do. Success was about taking credit for the right things at the right times and making sure anyone who threatened your position was destroyed before they could become a problem. He had a Stanford MBA and a smile that was carefully designed to inspire trust, even though nothing about him was trustworthy. He built his career on the backs of other people's work, claiming their innovations as his own, presenting their ideas as his creations, and disposing of anyone who tried to call him out. When he walked into the translation department and saw the corrections on the whiteboard, his first instinct was confusion. The work was extraordinary. The translations were technically perfect. The clarifications showed a level of expertise that none of Technova's current staff possessed. When he saw the quality of the work, his confusion transformed into something else. Calculation. Opportunity. The cold recognition that someone had just handed him exactly what he needed to advance his career. Night Phoenix, he read aloud, tracing the words with his finger. He stood there for a long moment, thinking, whoever this was, they were talented. More talented than him, certainly. More talented than anyone he'd ever worked with. They were also, clearly, trying to hide their identity, which meant they were vulnerable. Jason Mitchell did what Jason Mitchell always did when he encountered someone vulnerable and talented. He exploited them. He photographed the whiteboard, then erased the signature. He copied the translations into his own files, saving them under his own name. He deleted every trace of the mysterious helper who'd solved the company's impossible problem. And when Brandon Cross arrived for the Monday morning meeting, Mitchell was ready with the performance of his life. Actually, Mitchell announced to the assembled executives, his voice carrying just the right note of humble confidence. I did this. I've been studying Korean privately for the past few months. I thought it might come in handy given our expansion into Asian markets. Cross raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed despite himself. You translated the entire technical section in one night. What can I say? Mitchell spread his hands in a gesture of false modesty. I'm committed to this company. When I saw the challenge you laid out on Friday, I knew I had to step up. The other executives nodded approvingly. This was the kind of initiative they respected, the kind of dedication that got people promoted. Cross promoted Mitchell on the spot. Jason Mitchell was now the lead translator for the Chunghwa deal, personally responsible for completing the remaining sections before the 72-hour deadline expired. From the doorway, invisible behind her cleaning cart, Maya watched it all happen. She watched Mitchell take credit for her work, using words she had written, presenting insights she had developed, claiming expertise that he absolutely did not possess. She watched Cross shower him with praise, congratulating him for the very translations that Maya had completed at 3 in the morning while her mother slept in a hospital bed she couldn't afford. She watched her only chance at recognition, her only opportunity to prove her worth, disappear before her eyes like smoke in the wind. She was invisible again. She was always invisible. 56 hours remaining until the deadline. 56 hours until her family was homeless. Maya thought she was being clever, continuing to help from the shadows while Mitchell took the credit. She had no idea what Mitchell was already planning to do next. Most people watching this would have walked away right here. The question is, would you? Everything Maya had built was about to collapse, and the person destroying it was smiling the entire time. Monday morning brought new complications. Someone in the IT department had noticed unusual after-hours activity in the translation department. Login timestamps that didn't match any employee's schedule. File access patterns that suggested someone was working when no one was supposed to be in the building. Security installed new cameras. Every entrance, every hallway, every desk was now under constant surveillance. The building that had once been Maya's secret workplace was suddenly a prison of watchful electronic eyes. Maya couldn't risk her nighttime sessions anymore. One wrong move, one moment caught on camera, and everything would unravel. Her job, her mother's safety, her entire carefully constructed invisible life. But she couldn't stop either. The translation wasn't done. Mitchell was going to fail, and when he failed, he would blame someone else. He always blamed someone else. And Maya had already seen enough of his work to know that his private Korean studies were a complete fabrication. So she found new ways to work. She translated in bathroom stalls during her 15-minute breaks, typing furiously on her phone with one hand while the other held her father's technical journal open to the relevant pages. She developed a system of shorthand notes, squeezing complex translations into margins and empty spaces. She worked in supply closets during her lunch breaks, surrounded by mops and cleaning chemicals and the sharp smell of industrial disinfectant, racing to complete another paragraph before someone came looking for paper towels or window cleaner. She left more Night Phoenix notes, more corrections, more improvements to Mitchell's increasingly sloppy and inaccurate work. She couldn't help herself. The errors he was making weren't just embarrassing. They were dangerous. They could cost the company millions. They could hurt people. And Mitchell kept claiming credit for everything she fixed. His confidence grew with every compliment from Cross. He swaggered through the hallways like a conquering hero, completely unaware that his entire reputation was built on the work of the woman who emptied his trash can every night. 48 hours until eviction. 44 hours until the Chunghwa deadline. That Monday night, everything got worse. Maya was in the middle of her shift, pushing her cart through the executive floor, when her phone buzzed with a call from a number she didn't recognize. It was the hospital. Her mother had collapsed. Blood pressure spike. The ambulance was already on its way to the emergency room. Maya ran. She left her cleaning cart in the middle of a hallway, abandoned her duties without a word to anyone, and ran 12 blocks through the dark city streets to the hospital. She arrived breathless and terrified, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The doctors had already stabilized Ji-won's condition by the time Maya burst through the emergency room doors. Her mother was alive. She was going to be okay, but okay came with a price. "We need to keep her overnight for observation," the nurse explained, her voice professionally sympathetic. "There's a deposit required for the extended stay." "How much?" $2,400. Maya felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Her savings account contained $340. She'd spent everything else on rent and medication and food and all the other expenses that kept piling up faster than she could pay them down. $2,400 might as well have been $24 million. She sat in the hospital waiting room that night, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the quiet suffering of strangers, and she worked. She translated on her phone, her eyes burning from exhaustion and unshed tears, her fingers aching from the cramped position. She completed another section of the Chunghwa document while her mother slept in a hospital bed that Maya had no idea how to pay for. She worked until the words blurred together and her hands stopped responding to her brain's commands. Then she slept for 2 hours in an uncomfortable plastic chair, and when she woke up, she started working again. Tuesday morning brought the investigation. Someone had reported suspicious after-hours activity in the building. Security pulled footage from the new cameras, reviewed access logs, cross-referenced timestamps with employee schedules. They interrogated every member of the maintenance staff. One by one, cleaning workers were called into a small conference room and questioned about their movements, their access, their potential involvement in what security was now calling possible industrial espionage. When they brought Maya in for questioning, she played the role she'd perfected over 6 years of survival. "No understand problem," she said, her eyes wide and vacant, her English deliberately broken and hesitant. I clean only. I clean good. No computer. I no touch computer. The security officer nodded, satisfied by what he saw. Just another cleaning lady who didn't know anything about corporate secrets or translation software or the complex machinations of international business deals. Just another invisible person who wasn't worth worrying about. Maya left the interrogation room with her secret intact. But as she stepped into the hallway, Jason Mitchell was waiting for her. He fell into step beside her, matching her pace as she walked toward her abandoned cleaning cart. His presence was suffocating, a reminder that she was never truly safe. "Looking for this?" he asked quietly. He held up her father's moonstone seal. The pale blue stone caught the fluorescent light, the carved characters glinting like an accusation. Maya's heart stopped beating. She felt the blood drain from her face. "I found it in the supply closet on the 3rd floor," Mitchell continued, turning the seal over in his fingers with casual cruelty. "Unusual item for a cleaning lady to be carrying around, don't you think? These characters here." He traced them with his fingertip. "They mean knowledge, don't they? Knowledge illuminates." Interesting motto for someone who supposedly doesn't understand English. Maya said nothing. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. "I checked your personnel file," Mitchell said, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for her. "Interesting reading. Your mother's visa expired 3 years ago. She's been living here illegally ever since. One phone call to immigration, and she's on a plane back to Korea within the week." He tucked the seal into his pocket, letting Maya watch her father's legacy disappear into the possession of the man who had already stolen her work. "I filed a report with HR," Mitchell continued. "Unauthorized materials. Suspicious behavior. Association with potential security threats. You'll be receiving a formal warning within the hour." Maya found her voice, though it came out barely louder than a whisper. "What do you want?" Mitchell smiled. It was the coldest smile Maya had ever seen. "I want you to stay quiet," he said. "Stay in your lane. Keep cleaning toilets. Keep being invisible. Forget you ever saw anything in the translation department. Forget you ever had any ideas about being anything more than what you are." He leaned closer, close enough that Maya could smell his expensive cologne and the coffee on his breath. "Speak up about anything, and I make one phone call. Your mother will be deported before you can say goodbye. Or," he straightened up, adjusting his tie, "you stay quiet. You keep your head down. And none of this ever happened." He walked away, whistling a cheerful tune that echoed through the empty hallway. Maya stood frozen, watching her father's moonstone seal disappear around the corner in the pocket of a man who had no idea what it meant. 34 hours until eviction. 34 hours until Maya lost everything. But it was about to get so much worse. Because Maya was about to discover that Jason Mitchell wasn't just stealing credit for her work. He was actively committing corporate sabotage. Comment, expose him. Right now, if you think Maya should risk everything and speak up, let me know what you would do in her situation. Maya found proof that could save the company, but that same proof could destroy her entire life. Wednesday morning arrived like a cascade of disasters, each one worse than the last. Human Resources issued Maya a formal warning for the unauthorized materials Mitchell had reported. They confiscated her father's moonstone seal, tagging it as evidence of some unspecified security concern and locking it in a drawer that Maya couldn't access. Her phone buzzed with a message from the hospital. Her mother's condition required an extended stay. The cardiac monitoring, the blood pressure medication, the specialized care that G1 needed to survive all came with a price tag. $2,500. Due immediately. The ambulance copay from Monday night had already depleted Maya's last savings. She had nothing left. Not a single dollar. And at 9 o'clock that morning, her apartment building manager posted a final eviction notice on her door. Eviction would proceed in 30 hours if the full balance wasn't paid. No extensions. No exceptions. No mercy. Maya stood in the Technova break room, staring at her phone, watching her life fall apart in real time. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The coffee machine gurgled in the corner. Everything around her was ordinary and mundane, even as her entire world collapsed. 30 hours until deadline. 30 hours until eviction. $0 in her account. 0 options left to pursue. And then she remembered something Mitchell had said. He'd mentioned that he'd moved her files to his secure drive for safekeeping. That meant he'd been accessing her work. That meant he'd seen what she'd translated. That meant his computer might contain evidence of exactly what he'd been doing. Maya waited until the lunch hour, when Mitchell left for his usual 2-hour networking meal at the expensive steakhouse down the street. The man was nothing if not predictable in his arrogance. Then she slipped into his office. Her cleaning access still worked on his door. Why wouldn't it? She was just the invisible janitor who emptied his trash. Nobody thought twice about her presence anywhere in the building. Mitchell's computer was still logged in. His password was saved. His files were accessible. What Maya found in the next 10 minutes changed everything. Mitchell hadn't just been stealing her translations. He'd been deliberately altering them, corrupting them, sabotaging the entire Changhua deal from the inside. His version of the document translated stringent quality control protocols with 15% higher standards than industry requirements as minimal oversight requirements with flexible implementation timeline. His version changed suggests workforce restructuring of 350 positions with comprehensive retraining programs and priority rehiring to flexible staffing arrangements at company discretion with no obligation for continued employment. His version of the legal terms would violate international trade law in at least 3 different jurisdictions. If Technova signed the contract as Mitchell had translated it, they would face massive fines, government investigations, and potential criminal charges for fraudulent business practices. Maya kept searching, her hands trembling on the keyboard. She found email drafts hidden in a folder marked personal that Mitchell had apparently forgotten to delete. The emails were addressed to executives at Apex Tech, Technova's biggest competitor. Mitchell was in active negotiations to jump ship. But he wasn't just leaving. He was ensuring that Technova's biggest deal would fail spectacularly before he walked out the door. If the Changhua partnership fell through because of translation errors, Apex Tech would swoop in and secure the deal instead. They would get the $500 million partnership. They would get the technology. They would get everything that Technova was about to lose. And Mitchell's reward for making that happen? $150,000 wired to an offshore account, plus a senior vice president position at Apex Tech. Maya stared at the evidence glowing on the screen. Jason Mitchell wasn't just a credit-stealing fraud. He wasn't just a bully who threatened vulnerable people to protect his lives. He was a corporate spy actively sabotaging his own company for personal profit. She could expose him right now. She could take screenshots, march into Brandon Cross's office, and end Mitchell's career before the lunch hour was over. But then what? She was still just a cleaning lady with broken English and a security warning in her personnel file. Mitchell was a vice president with a Stanford MBA, a corner office, and the CEO's trust. Screenshots from his computer could be dismissed as fabrications. Her word against his was no contest at all. If she accused him without proof that couldn't be denied, he would destroy her. He would call immigration. He would have her fired. He would make sure she never worked anywhere again. No, Maya needed him to fail publicly. She needed the truth to be so obvious, so undeniable, that no one could ignore it or explain it away. That meant completing the translation herself, perfectly and accurately, with no room for error. That meant using her father's research journal to fill in the technical details that only someone with direct knowledge of the GX 600 semiconductor series could provide. That meant walking into that boardroom when the moment was right and forcing a confrontation that would either make her career or destroy her life. 24 hours remaining until both deadlines. Maya made her choice. All or nothing. Maya was about to attempt the impossible. But Mitchell had one more move that would destroy everything she'd built. We're halfway through this story. If you're gripped, smash that like button right now and make sure you're subscribed. Because the next 20 minutes are absolutely wild. 13 minutes before the deadline, Maya woke up to find everything destroyed. Wednesday night, in an unexpected twist, Brandon Cross had given Maya a small conference room to complete her work. It wasn't kindness. Cross didn't have kindness in him. He wanted to watch her fail in real time. He wanted proof that his instincts were right, that cleaning ladies should stay in their lane, that the social order he believed in was natural and correct. Maya didn't care about his motivations. She just needed the space. She needed somewhere to work without hiding in bathroom stalls and supply closets. She worked through the night, hour after hour, fighting exhaustion with pure willpower. Her father's research journal lay open beside her borrowed laptop, filled with his handwritten notes and detailed diagrams. Carlos Santos had worked on the GX 600 semiconductor series before Technova discarded him. His knowledge, his expertise, his years of research had all been preserved in that journal. Knowledge that Changhua Technologies assumed Technova still possessed. Knowledge that only someone who had inherited Carlos Santos's work could possibly provide. By 3 in the morning, Maya was 87% complete. The translation was flawless. The technical details were precise. The clarifications and improvements would make the partnership stronger than anyone at Technova could have imagined. Her eyes burned from staring at the screen. Her fingers ached from typing. Empty coffee cups surrounded her like a fortress built from exhaustion. The conference room smelled like stale caffeine and desperation. But she was going to make it. For the first time in days, Maya allowed herself to feel something like hope. The finish line was within reach. At 3:17 in the morning, she rested her head on the desk. Just for a moment. Just to close her eyes for 1 second. Just to catch her breath before the final push. She woke to the sound of shattering ceramic and the sensation of hot liquid pouring across her hands. Coffee, everywhere, flooding across her notes, seeping into her keyboard, soaking through pages of her father's journal, dripping onto her laptop. Jason Mitchell stood over her, an empty mug dangling from his fingers, his face arranged in an expression of completely fake concern. "Oh, clumsy me," he said. "I was just bringing you a refill, and I tripped. So sorry about that." Maya lunged for her laptop, desperately trying to save it, but the screen was already flickering, sparking, dying. "Don't worry about your files," Mitchell continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I moved them to my secure drive for safekeeping. You know, just in case something happened to your equipment. Wasn't that thoughtful of me?" The screen went black. A thin wisp of smoke rose from the keyboard. "Technical glitch," Mitchell shrugged. "These things happen. For hours of work. Gone." Maya's coffee-stained notes were barely legible, the ink running together into meaningless smears. Her father's journal was soaked, pages sticking together, diagrams blurred beyond recognition. Her digital backup was corrupted or deleted. Everything she'd built in the past 3 days had been systematically destroyed. "Mr. Cross expects perfection," Mitchell reminded her, leaning against the doorframe with casual cruelty. One mistranslation, one technical error, and it cost the company millions. "You might want to consider withdrawing from this little challenge before you embarrass yourself any further." He smiled. "After all, we both know you're not really qualified for this kind of work, aren't you? Some people are meant to clean toilets, Maya. That's just the natural order of things." He left her alone in that conference room, surrounded by the wreckage of her work and her hope. 5 hours and 43 minutes until the deadline. Her phone buzzed. The landlord was moving the eviction to this morning. Police would be there at noon to enforce the removal if she didn't pay. Another buzz. The hospital needed payment authorization immediately, or they would have to transfer her mother to a county facility without the specialized cardiac care she required. Another buzz. Her mother's heart rate was irregular again. They were considering emergency intervention. Maya sat in that coffee-soaked conference room and stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The clock on the wall ticked away seconds she couldn't afford to lose. She thought about giving up. She thought about walking away from all of it. Finding another job somewhere far from Technova, somewhere Mitchell and Cross and everyone who had ever overlooked her couldn't touch her. Starting over from nothing, again, for the 100th time. Maybe the universe was trying to tell her something. Maybe she wasn't meant for more than this. Maybe she should just accept her place and stop fighting against the current. Then her phone rang. It was the hospital again. "Miss Santos, your mother's condition is deteriorating. We need immediate authorization for cardiac intervention. We need you to make a decision right now." Maya looked at the ruined papers scattered across the table. She looked at her father's journal, its pages stained and stuck together, but still legible if she looked closely enough. She looked at her hands, burned pink from the hot coffee, still capable of typing if she could push through the pain. She heard her father's voice in her memory, speaking words he'd told her 1,000 times when she was growing up.
언어는 다르다.
He used to say, "Language is a bridge. It connects worlds that cannot touch on their own. Never forget that, Maya. Your words can take you anywhere." Maya picked up her phone. "Authorize the intervention," she said. "Do whatever you need to do to save her." Then she hung up, found a working computer in the next room, opened her father's journal to the section on thermal modeling systems, and started typing. What happened next is almost impossible to believe, but every word of it is true. The billionaire was about to fire her. But Maya had one card left to play. Maya jerked awake to find Brandon Cross standing directly over her, his shadow falling across the desk like a judgment. The wall clock read 8:47 in the morning, 13 minutes until the deadline. She was disheveled, coffee-stained, and exhausted beyond any description language could provide. Papers were scattered everywhere. Her borrowed laptop showed a frozen progress bar. She looked like exactly what Cross expected her to be, a failure who had reached too far and fallen short. "I expected this," Cross said, his voice flat with the bored disappointment of a man who enjoyed being proven right about people. "People should stay in their lanes." Housekeepers clean. Executives execute. That's the natural order of things. That's why I'm rich in your. He gestured at her appearance, at the coffee stains on her uniform, at the dark circles under her eyes. Well, he turned to his assistant. Draft a termination notice. Miss Santos violated company policy by accessing confidential documents without proper authorization. She is no longer welcome in this building. But our agreement, Maya started, her voice rough from exhaustion, was contingent on delivery. Cross cut her off. And you failed. I gave you every opportunity to prove me wrong, and instead you confirmed exactly what I've always known. Some people just aren't meant for more than what they are. Behind Cross, visible through the glass walls of the conference room, Jason Mitchell's smirk was triumphant. He'd won. He'd destroyed the only person who knew his secret. Now he would coast to success on the partnership he'd sabotaged, and when it all fell apart, he'd be safely installed at Apex Tech, counting his $150,000 reward. Maya's hand found her bag beneath the desk. Her fingers touched the spine of her father's research journal, still damp from the coffee, but still intact. She remembered the equations her father used to trace in the air when she was a child, explaining how electrons moved through silicon substrates. She remembered the excitement in his voice when he talked about the GX 600 series, the technology he'd helped create before this company decided he was disposable. She remembered sitting on his lap while he worked, watching him press his moonstone seal into red ink and sign documents that would change the world. Wait, Maya said. She pulled out her father's journal. The pages were stained and wrinkled, but the words were still legible. The diagrams were still clear. The knowledge was still there, preserved through everything that had tried to destroy it. What is that? Cross demanded, his voice sharp with irritation. My father was an engineer, Maya said. She stood up, and for the first time in 6 years, she let them see her as she really was. Not broken English, not vacant eyes, not the invisible cleaning lady who didn't understand anything. He worked on the GX 600 semiconductor series before your company fired him and destroyed his life. This journal contains his original research notes, technical specifications, testing parameters, manufacturing tolerances, the proprietary knowledge that Chunghwa Technologies assumes you still possess. She opened the journal to a page covered in her father's handwriting, diagrams of thermal modeling systems, equations for heat dissipation, notes on material stress testing that no one else in the world had access to, information that isn't in their documents, Maya continued, because they expect you to already know it, information that only someone with direct knowledge of the development process could provide. Cross's expression shifted. The dismissal faded, replaced by something that looked almost like calculation. Your father worked on the GX 600? Carlos Santos, Maya confirmed. He died 18 months after you threw him away. But before he died, he taught me everything he knew. Because that's what parents do when they love their children. They pass on what matters. The room was silent. The clock continued ticking. 8:51, 9 minutes remaining. Cross looked at the journal, then at Maya, then at the clock. $500 million on the line. 9 minutes until deadline. No other options. You have 8 minutes, Cross said finally. Maya sat down at the borrowed computer and began to type. Her father's journal lay open beside her. The moonstone seal, recovered from the evidence drawer by Cross's reluctant order, sat warm in her palm. For the first time in 6 years, she wasn't hiding. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't invisible. She was exactly who she had always been. The daughter of Carlos Santos, fluent in 3 languages, brilliant in ways that no one had ever bothered to see. She worked with a focus she had never experienced before. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Her eyes scanned her father's notes, translating his knowledge into words that would save a company that had never deserved her help. 8:58, 2 minutes remaining. Maya saved the final file. She walked into that boardroom carrying a completed translation that represented everything her father had built, everything Mitchell had tried to destroy, and everything she had almost lost. And what happened next made every single jaw in that room drop straight to the floor. If you're not subscribed yet, do it right now. You do not want to miss the ending. The CEO of a $2 billion Korean company just asked to speak to the janitor. The boardroom was packed with Technova's most senior executives, assembled in their expensive suits and carefully neutral expressions for the video conference that would determine the future of the company. Brandon Cross sat at the head of the mahogany table, flanked by lawyers and advisors who had spent the past 3 days accomplishing absolutely nothing useful. Maya placed her completed translation in front of Cross. He scanned it with the skepticism of a man who expected to find errors, who wanted to find errors, who needed to find errors to justify everything he believed about people like her. The video screen at the end of the room flickered to life. Park Min-ho, CEO of Chunghwa Technologies, appeared on the screen. He was an elegant man in his 60s, with silver hair and the calm confidence of someone who had built an empire through intelligence rather than inheritance. Beside him sat an older man with kind eyes, Dr. Kim, the company's chief technical officer and one of the most respected engineers in the semiconductor industry. Cross cleared his throat and began his prepared remarks. "Gentlemen, we've completed the translation as requested, and we're prepared to move forward with." Dr. Kim interrupted him. He spoke in Korean, his eyes fixed not on Brandon Cross or any of the executives around the table, but on Maya Santos, standing awkwardly by the door in her coffee-stained uniform.
실례합니다.
"Excuse me, is that Maya Santos I see there?" Every executive in the room turned to stare at the cleaning lady. Dr. Kim continued in Korean, his voice warm with genuine emotion.
라파엘 베가의 따님이시죠?
"You are Carlos Santos's daughter, are you not? Your father spoke of your gifts often when we worked together. He was so proud of you. It is an honor to finally meet you." Maya felt the room shift around her. She felt the weight of every assumption, every dismissal, every moment of invisibility begin to crack and fall away. She answered in flawless Korean, her accent perfect, her vocabulary precise, her voice steady.
감사합니다. 김 박사님.
"The honor is mine. My father admired your work greatly. He kept your letters until the day he died." Cross's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked almost like fear. The cleaning lady spoke Korean. The cleaning lady knew their business partners. The cleaning lady had been hiding in plain sight for 6 years. Park Min-ho spoke next, switching to English for the benefit of the room. "Mr. Cross, I must confess something to you. This translation challenge was never really about testing your company's linguistic capabilities." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room like a blanket. "We deliberately included technical complexity that only someone with direct knowledge of the GX 600 development process could navigate correctly. We wanted to know if Technova still possessed the expertise that Carlos Santos brought to this technology before you terminated him." Cross shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I don't understand." "The workforce restructuring clause was a character test," Park continued. "We wanted to see how your company would handle morally ambiguous language. Would you obscure the implications to make the deal look better? Or would you clarify them honestly, even if it made negotiations more difficult?" He smiled, and there was steel beneath the warmth. "Our intelligence team noticed something interesting over the past few days. Someone at your company was getting the translations right. Not just technically accurate, but ethically precise, clarifying ambiguities that others would have ignored, flagging sections that needed review, working with exactly the kind of integrity that Carlos Santos always demonstrated in his work." Park's eyes moved to Maya. "We had our suspicions about who that person might be. We hope we were right." The room was absolutely silent. Not a single executive moved or breathed. Maya stepped forward. She spoke in Korean first, then translated herself into English, her voice clear and strong. "Mr. Park wishes to know why your vice president deliberately mistranslated key sections of this document with the intention of sabotaging the partnership." She pulled out her phone and connected it to the conference room display system. Security footage appeared on the screen. Jason Mitchell, captured clearly at 3:17 in the morning, pouring coffee across Maya's laptop and laughing as he deleted files from her directory. More footage. Mitchell erasing the Night Phoenix signature from the whiteboard. Mitchell copying files to his own computer. Mitchell meeting with representatives from Apex Tech in a parking garage 3 blocks away. The timestamps were undeniable. The evidence was irrefutable. Mr. Mitchell's translations would have violated international trade law in multiple jurisdictions, Maya continued. Quality control protocols were deliberately weakened to create liability for your company. Layoff requirements were obscured to prevent proper ethical review. Legal terms were altered in ways that would have exposed Technova to massive fines and criminal investigations. She showed the email drafts, the correspondence with Apex Tech, the promise of $150,000 in exchange for sabotage. Mr. Mitchell wasn't trying to help this partnership succeed, Maya concluded. He was actively working to destroy it from inside, for his own personal profit. The silence in that boardroom was absolute. Every executive stared at the evidence on the screen. Every face registered shock and horror. Mitchell's face had gone completely white. He opened his mouth to speak, to object, to spin some explanation that might save him. But there was no explanation. There was no escape. Cross's voice was quiet and cold when he finally spoke. "Mr. Mitchell, you're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building." Two guards appeared at the door. Mitchell was still protesting, still insisting there had been some misunderstanding, still trying to blame Maya for his own crimes, as they physically removed him from the room. Maya watched him go. She felt no satisfaction, no triumph, no joy. She just felt tired and relieved, and for the first time in 6 years, visible. But the story wasn't over yet, because there was one more twist coming that nobody expected. She saved the company. Now she was about to make them pay. Park Min-ho spoke again, his voice formal and deliberate, switching back to Korean and waiting for Maya to translate. "Chunghwa Technologies will proceed with this partnership," he announced, "on one condition." Maya translated his words, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what was coming, but she could feel the weight of it in the air. "Miss Santos must oversee the implementation of this partnership as our designated cultural liaison," Park continued. "We will only work with her. She understands our values, our language, and our expectations in ways that no one else at your company has demonstrated. If Technova cannot guarantee her involvement at an executive level with appropriate compensation and authority, this partnership will not proceed. $500 million. One condition. Her. Cross looked between the video screen and Maya. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles went white. He was trapped. Everyone in the room knew it. The cleaning lady had just become the most valuable person in the building, and there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. "Fine," Cross said through gritted teeth. "Miss Santos will oversee cultural aspects of the implementation." Maya felt something shift in her chest. Something that had been broken for 6 years, something she'd learned to live with and work around and pretend didn't exist, began slowly to heal. Cross reached for his checkbook. His hand was steady, but his expression was bitter as he wrote the amount they'd agreed upon. $30,000. His daily salary, exactly as promised. Park Min-ho spoke again, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "One more thing. Chunghwa includes a cultural consultancy signing bonus for Miss Santos specifically. $55,000, to be paid immediately upon contract execution. Consider it our investment in the partnership." Maya stared at the numbers. 30,000 plus 55,000. $85,000. Enough to stop the eviction. Enough to pay for her mother's cardiac care. Enough to clear the hospital bills and the medical debt and the back rent and everything else that had been crushing her for years. Enough to breathe. Her hands shook as she accepted the checks. She looked at the numbers, and she couldn't quite believe they were real. Cross handed her the moonstone seal, recovered from the evidence drawer. The pale blue stone was warm in her palm, the carved characters catching the light. "It seems I underestimated you," Cross said. The admission clearly cost him something. Maya met his eyes without flinching. Many people do. She placed the moonstone seal on the boardroom table, visible for everyone to see. Not hidden in her pocket anymore. Not a secret she was ashamed of. A legacy. A bridge. A light. 6 months later, Maya Santos sat in a corner office on the executive floor of Technova Industries. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. Her father's original engineering diagrams lined the walls, framed like the treasures they were. His photo sat beside the moonstone seal on her desk, the pale blue stone catching afternoon light in a crystal stand. Director of Global Relations. 6-figure salary. A voice that mattered in rooms where decisions were made. Her first official act had been establishing the Carlos Santos Scholarship Fund for the children of displaced workers. Her second, a comprehensive audit of the company's layoff policies and wage disparities. Technova's market share in Asian markets had increased by 32% in 2 quarters. Employee retention was up 24%. The numbers told their own story. Jason Mitchell was teaching business communication at a community college 2 states away. He would never work in corporate America again. On her first day as director, Maya had addressed the board in 3 languages, switching seamlessly between Korean, Spanish, and English. "Talent doesn't always arrive in expected packages," she told them, her voice steady and clear. "But companies that recognize it, regardless of the wrapping, gain competitive advantage that cannot be replicated." She'd shown them the numbers. 32% market share increase, 24% better retention, 450 new jobs created across 3 regions, 18% valuation increase projected within the year. 6 months ago, I was invisible in this room, she continued. Today, I'm presenting our international expansion strategy. That transformation wasn't about me becoming someone different. It was about finally being seen for who I always was. Brandon Cross had watched from the end of the table, his expression holding something that might have been grudging respect. It wasn't a moral awakening. He still cared more about profit than people, and that would probably never change. But results spoke louder than prejudice, and Maya's results were undeniable. That afternoon, Maya visited her mother. Ji-won sat in a comfortable chair near the window of her care facility, sunlight warming her face. Physical therapy equipment stood nearby. A laptop rested on her lap. Online engineering courses pulled up on the screen. You look tired, Ji-won observed in Korean. Maya laughed softly. I think I always will be. Ji-won reached over, squeezing her hand. But not afraid anymore. Maya shook her head. No, not anymore. Later that week, the first Carlos Santos scholarship recipients presented their projects. Maya stood before poster boards filled with equations and prototypes, watching young engineers from underrepresented backgrounds explain work they'd once assumed would never be valued. One young woman presented a thermal efficiency model that reminded Maya painfully of her father's early research. Who helped you with this? Maya asked gently. The student shook her head, shy but proud. No one. I just kept working on it. Maya understood that answer more than anyone. She thought about the night she'd sat in a dark conference room at 3 a.m, translating a document that would change everything. She thought about her father's journal, coffee-stained but intact, its knowledge preserved through everything that had tried to destroy it. She thought about the moonstone seal, no longer hidden in her pocket, but displayed on her desk where everyone could see it. Language is a bridge, her father used to say, and Maya Santos had built one strong enough to carry others across. Late one evening, as she prepared to leave the office, Maya walked past the supply closet where she'd once hidden during lunch breaks, frantically translating on her phone while surrounded by mops and cleaning chemicals. The door was closed now, neatly organized, untouched. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. In another part of the city, somewhere in the buildings rising against the skyline, there were others like her. Brilliant people working in the shadows. Translators in call centers. Engineers driving rideshares. Doctors cleaning houses, waiting for someone to see them. Maya couldn't save them all, but she'd left the bridge standing for the next person who needed to cross. She turned off the lights in her office, the moonstone seal catching one final glimmer before darkness settled. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the quiet revolution happening in glass towers, one invisible person at a time. Maya Santos walked into the night, no longer defined by the rooms she cleaned or the silence she'd kept, but by the world she connected. And somewhere, in spaces between words and meaning, between languages and cultures, between what people see and what they overlook, the bridge held firm. Has someone ever underestimated your potential? Have you had a moment when you finally got to show your true value? Share your story in the comments below. Let's build a community of invisible people becoming invaluable. If this story inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit subscribe for more stories like this every week. Turn on notifications so you never miss one. And if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel like you didn't matter, show this video some love with a like. Remember, your next chapter could be just one brave decision away, just like Maya's was.